And we're live. Welcome everybody to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. We'll be following along in the agenda that was posted in issue 439 in the NPM RFC's repo. And if you haven't already, feel free to add yourself as an attendee to the meeting notes doc, the HackMD doc that I shared in chat. And have poked a few Slack channels. Hopefully folks will trickle in if they want to join today. Quick reminder and acknowledgement that these calls and all comms on the RFC's repo are governed under a code of conduct, and we ask folks to please be kind. And in these calls, if someone's talking, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. And just to be mindful and thoughtful of each other as we discuss work in flight here and the proposals. I want to give some time also for any announcements folks might have. Does anybody have anything they wanted to share? If not, we can jump right into the agenda. There's also a note for the previous meeting notes from last week there. So there's a link if folks want to catch up on what we've been discussing lately. The first RFC that we had queued up is number 126. This is a proposal for adding types information to the package.json in the registry. I noticed that Gar, you added the agenda label to this in I think in the last couple of days. I'm not sure if you want to note why we want to bring this back up.
It was more about the pull request associated with it, because I wasn't sure. It's because it predates any of my involvement, and I'm cleaning up repackaged.json. This pull request is old, and things have changed a lot in the website because we now show whether they have TypeScript. I wasn't sure if this was still something we wanted to do, so I just added the agenda. Any historical knowledge holders can weigh in. It seems pretty straightforward, but I don't know if this is the direction we want to go still.
Yeah, so if my memory serves me right, I think Ordo had done a bit of work to add this information, right? And had opened up that pull request, and we just never followed up on and pulling it in. So the corresponding PR that you're speaking to is number 92, I believe.
I don't think chat.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. Issue number 92 and repackage.json. I'll just add that to the meeting notes. So if this lands, this information should be readily available based on the fact that we are pulling out package metadata and serving that in the registry today. Or would we have to queue up the registry team to do any work to ensure that this is being served?
It wouldn't backport anything because I don't think existing documents can change. So all this does is when you read your package.json, it'll add those two fields. So I think anything that touches or changes a package.json will add those. Yeah, like I said, I'm not fully versed on the use case here.
It would just add them when you publish. I believe publish is the only thing that uses read package.json right now. Everything else uses read package.json fast, or it just parses it, makes an edit, and writes it back.
I'm just taking a few notes here.
Publish and unpublish, and of course it doesn't matter for a publish. Okay,
right.
So everything that they publish after, whenever this lands in the CLI, will have those attributes in it, in the published document. Wonderful.
But only the full metadata document. The minified document will strip it out.
Corgi docs won't have that.
It's
Yeah.
not on our whitelist of fields. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this seems, fine. I just, like I said, it predates any involvement I have, and I just wanted to make sure this was still something we wanted to do.
So action is pulling that into the next.
Yeah, I'll merge it. It'll ship Thursday. And Jordan, thanks for weighing in on newer models of .. I didn't realize that was the thing we wanted now, so I'm fine moving that in.
It looks like it has failed some linting tests.
I got to make a new PR with the linting fixes, but I mean, I've already got a branch for it. That's no problem.
I haven't looked at it, and probably if I had any opinions about it, I forgot them years ago. If you want another set of eyes, I'd be happy to do a review of it, but I got no opinion.
Rebecca already said it looked good, and I know she's not part of the team, but like I really trust that opinion. So
yeah, as long as it's doing what it says on the tin and what
yeah,
it says on the tin,
it does, and there's tests.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah, and if you need more context, you can always reach out to Orta internally as well. You can book them. So awesome.
Thank you.
So just giving you the action to update PR and share the linting. Test pass. Awesome. Moving on then. I know this is a draft PR, Fritz, but I want to pull this up. So I added the agenda label here, PR number 437, the RFC to add robust lifecycle scripts. Did you want to give kind of like an overview of what you're starting to work on here, Fritz?
Yeah, so again, like you said, it's a draft. So I just wanted to get a discussion started on this. It was inspired by the bug in 3042, where in npm v6 we had pre-uninstall, uninstall, and post-uninstall lifecycle scripts, and we don't have that anymore. After discussing it with people and investigating, it's just sort of, it became clear that what we're missing, the reason why we can't really have these scripts is because we're missing context. Like these scripts wouldn't know why they were run, and it's unclear when we would run them. Because when you uninstall a package, that's you uninstalling the package. Okay, that's user intention. That's one scenario, right? You're uninstalling a root or a global package. But if, say, a dependency changes a version a little bit, and now a package version can be deduped, so we don't have to have it in the tree in two places with two different versions anymore. And so one of those instances goes away. Is that really an uninstall, right? And there's all sorts of scenarios like that for really all of the lifecycle scripts that involve arborist reifying the tree, right? So these scripts don't have enough context to know exactly what's going on. And so this RFC is just a starting discussion on, okay, how do we solve this problem in such a way where those scripts get the necessary context? Do we pass arguments? Do we templatize the command line parameters? Do we just add more events that are more specific? And then also, how do we deal with the current lifecycle scripts? Do we just make them the default entries in a lifecycle sub-object, like I suggested, or do we do something else? Some of the discussion is interesting, especially around how much of the internals of the way the npm CLI works do we want to expose? going forward, because we're just kind of turning the whole thing inside out here, and that's pretty fragile over the long term in terms of potential changes. So anyway, just go ahead.
That's how we got in this state, right? Like,
yeah,
by doing that.
Yeah. So
not
maybe
having an clear abstraction is sort of what you're saying, and we've exposed too much of like how we were doing things by doing this. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if anyone else has had a chance to read through it or think about it, but yeah, I think there's a lot of potential here for improvement.
Awesome. So I guess the action here is for this group and folks listening or watching afterwards, to provide feedback in the RFC itself. You're going to keep this open for a bit, I think, and just continue to design it in the open, is what I understand, Fritz. And yeah.
Yeah, I'll take it out of draft as soon as at least I've filled in all the sections. But yeah, it definitely will need to be iterated on even after it's out of draft.
Sure. Anybody have any comments on this, or if not, we can move on. Okay. Moving on.
So
Go ahead.
I did have one comment. I think the thing about like how much implementation detail do we want to expose is the exact right thing to be concerned with, especially as we're going through what I assume we'll spend most of our time today on, this pure mode proposal. You know, the concept of a tree change might change pretty dramatically. I sort of brought that up like before tree change and after unpack or something as phases, just because we really, part of the challenge with uninstall is that we really can't run there's phases in the npm install process where we cannot run userland code for security reasons, for the fact that if you do almost anything, it will potentially blow up. It's just a foot gun. Like there's a lot of good reasons why we can't let the tree change at certain phases where we're relying on it being consistent. But yeah, that being said, we don't want it to be like, I am going to write these files, and now we're like, now in some future world, we're not writing files anymore. We're just writing an import map to a central location, and we have to like shim it because now everybody's depending on it, and we break React if we don't do it or whatever. I do want to try to avoid that. I think though there are some very like high level conceptual phases that we can think about. Like I am, you know, maybe before tree change is the wrong way to think about it, but like I'm about to read what is currently the state of the world, right? Like that's always going to be a phase we're going to have. Or I've resolved the package trees, like I've resolved the ideal tree, and these are the changes I'm about to make, and kind of giving users a way to kind of hook into that part of the process. And then they could just see like, is my package in the like to be removed list or something? Or, you know, have we added XYZ as a dependency or something? I think that will, if we try to zoom out and make a list of like those kind of conceptual phases, that's something that's got a little bit more staying power than implementation details.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up import map, because I mean, just with the, you know, if we're going to add multiple resolution engines and we're going to add multiple, you know, reifying strategies, it's good that we think about this in a more broad way.
Awesome. Okay. Moving on to RFC, probably the one that I was guessing we'd spend the most time on today, at least speaking to and potentially answering any questions. This is RC 436. This is new installation or mode or strategy that Vince Bailey, who's on the call today, has been working on. And we've actually been discussing quite a bit internally for a while now. And historically, I think we've been even spoken to the idea of configurable strategies, reification strategies in the past. And this is sort of like one of the first forays into that. So I'm not sure, Vincent, if you want to give maybe a high level overview of what the proposal is sort of outlining, and then any kind of follow-ups as well.
Sure. So this is a proposal to add a different installation or reification strategy to NPM. I think NPM already has 3, with one called Legacy and one called Bundled, I think. And there's the default, which I don't know if it has a name. I call it hoisting, because this strategy aims to remove duplication of dependencies by hoisting them to the root of the project, so that every workspace or every dependencies installed in that project have access to that one dependency. So the proposal of that RFC is to add a 4th optional reification strategy. So the reason for that is that we found limits with the current hoisting or default strategy, and this is kind of a suggestion for coming up with a strategy that doesn't have this drawbacks. So there is like the two drawbacks that I'm interested into addressing is the first one is perf, or perf, and the second one is strictness. So perf is the hoisting strategy will drag up in the folder structure packages so they can be shared, but when there is conflict, version conflicts, when 2 packages with different version have to be installed, only one can be installed at the root, the other one needs to be installed further down in the dependency tree, and that can end up in a lot of duplication. So you can have one package at a given dependency which is installed several times on disk, and that happens in reality, in real life. We see this over and over. So there is a huge cost in disk and in time, install time, to actually do that reification on disk. So that's the first problem that we're trying to improve. And the second one is what I call strictness, which is the side effect that when we hoist all the dependency as high as possible in the directory structure, that basically makes like we overshare the dependencies. So a workspace that doesn't have any dependency declared on package foo will still be able to require foo because someone else added a dependency to it. And that creates a problem as we scale, because as we scale, that means that any dependency modification in one workspace can potentially affect any other workspace. So for large, very large repos with many workspaces where it's very advantageous to be able to predict the scope of the impact of a dependency change. That is a big problem with hoisting. So that's the second problem we're trying to address with this proposal. Any questions so far?
I don't know if it's a question, but Jordan, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
No.
so I guess I was initially confused because of the mention of workspaces, and hoisting in workspaces is, to me, refers to taking dependencies from a child project and putting them at the root node modules. But it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like what you're talking about is the, like in a single project, the transitive dependencies being hoisted to the root of node modules. Is that the type of hoisting you're referring to?
Yeah, that too.
Okay. Because, okay, so it's, yeah, it's sort of both. Okay.
Yeah.
So is this accurate to say that you're basically, this is basically proposing like PNPM style resolution or something similar to
Yeah.
NPM?
This is like
Okay, so
in
that
the current
breaks a bunch of things.
Yeah, in the current.
I maintain a number of projects that have open issues filed, because, well, no longer open, but issues filed because PNP breaks them. I have many others that Yarn breaks. Yarn works around them because it hacks the runtime and actually like even like injects itself into what should be node modules files and like swaps them out so that it works. But neither of these approaches is without significant drawbacks. And ESLint plugin import, for example, which is a heavily used ESLint plugin, has always relied on this behavior for its node resolver, which users do not have to install, but their configuration can reference, and that gets 11 million downloads a week. So like I hear that it would be opt-in, but someone opting into it would then have things would break that they would have no control over and no way to fix. And so the end result is either they will then that will force them not to no longer use this dependency, which is an unfair disadvantage for dependencies relying on this decade-old behavior, or that will cause them to be unable to use the new mode, which defeats the purpose of adding it.
Yeah,
So-
and this is.
Go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, this is where actually this is a big, you touched on the big question is how compatible or how breaking. And in practice, I don't know, I don't have this data. So you mentioned one that has a lot of usage, and I think
I don't use either, so I don't have concrete examples. I just know that I've received over the years many bug reports on my many projects, most about Yarn and a few about PNPM. And in like IRC and other chat communities, the common advice is to tell people not to use those things because they have too many caveats. And the type of people who come to ask for help tend to have an easier time when they don't choose those paths. Obviously, again, being opt-in feeds into that somewhat, but it like, yeah, I mean, and just to say as well, like when it comes to workspaces, I've talked many times on this RFC call about the insufficient, the current workspaces are insufficient because they hoist, like the hoisting of child project dependencies to the root, making them available in sibling projects. That is actually a much larger likelihood of bugs in my experience than the hoisting of transitive dependencies to the root of a single project. And so and that was why my initial fervor on the PR was about that, trying to fix that problem. But I think that problem can and should be fixed without going full PNPM on it, basically. And I'd love to see us fix that problem first and then evaluate if the remaining problem is still worthy of adding a whole additional potentially breaking feature to NPM.
So I have one question on that, but I'll let Isaac jump in here first.
Yeah, so I think I made this comment on the PR, minutes before this, or maybe even as this meeting was starting. So I'm sure it didn't really get seen, but I think it makes sense to talk about this reification mode like 100% apart from workspaces per se, right? Workspaces might be the kind of the motivating factor, at least for like why the Microsoft One.js project cares about it, because they have this, however, like what 100 terabyte monorepo project or whatever. But I think even if you're not using workspaces, there's some real interesting trade-offs that we could start to explore. And I really want to make sure before we, like if we say, okay, well, look, PNPM has this particular problem with what is it, ESLint plugin imports, right? We can look at a couple of other projects that are broken by PNPM's specific implementation of this, and look at how PNPM, what workarounds exist. Maybe we could actually address those problems with this proposal and make it a little bit easier to opt into. But Jordan, I think you're coming at it from the right point of view of like, what is the concern that needs to be brought up and really fleshed out and explored and addressed. Two, I think this is not like, if anybody's like watching or on this call, like this is not a thing we're going to implement tomorrow. I think it does need quite a bit of kind of exploration, and it will almost certainly be in a Semper major, although it's from a strict Semper point of view, if it's opt-in, it could be a Semper minor. I suspect that there's going to be other changes that we need to make to our architecture to kind of enable it and make it work in the way as it's being proposed, and some of those might end up being Semper major or have just consequences that are easier to just make as a breaking change. The two kind of thoughts that I had, one is I'm not sure we need to kind of make a decision about what we do with things that are currently an eResolve error, because you have two dependencies that have a conflicting peer dependency. Whereas right now, we won't allow those two things to be installed at the same level in the tree. But it seems like with pure mode, you would be able to, because they would just get different versions. They'd get symlinked to different versions of their corresponding peer deps. And that could be nice in some cases. However, it could also be problematic if you have things like React 16 and 17 both being loaded at the same time. The second issue that I was kind of wondering about is, it seems like a change to transitive dependencies results in being an entirely different folder tree, right? So if I have A that depends on B at 1.x, if I want to update B, I have to also swap out the symlink for everything that depends on B, because now their locations on disk is going to be different. And yeah, just to the question brought up in chat, it seems like the way that things are going, like Fritz said, the future of something like Tink or a virtual file system or fallback at best kind of approach is going to be import maps. Like actually import maps is oddly pretty similar to what Tink would have provided, but without needing to hack the operating system or hack the Node.fs module. Because you just give a JSON blob that says, when you require this thing, it goes over here. And you can essentially do all of this without symlinks. But that is something that should be, like, that's not going to be possible in like Node less than probably 18. I wouldn't pin anything to it just yet. It's definitely something we're tracking, and we're going to try and guide that in a direction where, it makes sense for us to be able to just generate import maps as NPM. And maybe basically do, could essentially, if we have pure mode at that point or something like it, we could essentially do pure mode without all the symlinks, which would be wonderful. So that's all I had to say.
Anybody have anything that they want to add to that? Other than it seems like, and we've discussed this internally, that there's about 3 different pieces of work that all align. So improvements to npm link overrides, which is on our immediate sort of roadmap, and then also this new reification strategy, which I think, which you originally touched on, Jordan, and what Vincent alluded to, is trying to solve 3 different aspects of that we realize are problemsome for end users today. So like performance, strictness, and just the accuracy. And yeah, not hoisting, but also not incurring a penalty for not hoisting your dependencies. And then the shared versus not shared transitive dependency problem that Jordan and Isaac have had many conversations on in this forum on. This again is sort of like trying to, I think this RFC is trying to solve for all those use cases, and how we do that potentially is, you know, in the future, we can utilize import maps, but how we do that today might look a little bit differently, and could piggyback on potentially the work that we do for overrides and in the future here also for any improvements we make to npm link. So I see your hands up. Feel free to comment.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right, you know, and Isaac said that, you know, this isn't going to land, something like this wouldn't land right away, right? So this is some planned work. What if we solve the workspaces side of it, just isolated on its own, like Jordan suggested, and then make a holistic approach to a lot of these problems like npm link, and you know, resolution strategies in general, and get all of our ducks in a row behind import maps. And so we solve the immediate problems in as narrow of a focus as we can. Maybe we punt on some of them and go, you know, hey, it's not worth solving npm link right now when we know in, you know, a year and a half from now we're going to have import maps, right? So I think, yeah, I think we could make a really clear vision for what that's going to be, and it's going to solve just all of these related problems. And we can solve the immediate problems in a narrow way.
Yeah, I'm gonna take some notes, but I'm not sure if anybody else had anything they want to top up here. My biggest concern is like I don't want to, and I think you're taking the right approach, Fritz, by recommending we can solve this for workspaces first. That would also, like, you know, I know that Vincent's team is hoping to make movement here and help contribute to this. So we have extra resources obviously behind, you know, going forward with an opt-in reification strategy, like, and work around this proposal. So like, I don't want to stall and block to get something done here, but I also don't think it makes sense for us to like build the wrong thing. So like, if we can learn from doing this just, let's say, for workspaces, then maybe that helps us solve this more holistically, you know, 6 months to 12 months down the line when we're looking at potentially like the npm link story, and yeah, like then we are potentially generating and consuming import maps. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, and just in practice, both in many small projects and also like large company things, the bugs that people fear from being able to require things that aren't in package JSON are even uncommon problems historically in my experience, and are virtually non-existent problems because things like TypeScript and ESLint plugin import check that for you. The tooling's been around for the better part of a decade to verify that, and everyone pretty much uses it, and these bugs just don't happen. And the use cases I'm talking about, like the ESLint plugin import one that relies on it, is because it's not required from JavaScript. And so there's no static tooling that can let you know. And so it would simply be forcing pain on users to require them to add the dependency. So like, yeah, there's, I think that the problems that workspace hosting causes are going to be very common. I've run into them already in Yarn workspace and Lerna workspace repos. I'm very interested in seeing those solved, but my very strong intuition is that once those are solved, that we may discover that there is in fact not much of a need for further strictness other than to scratch like an ideological itch. And I think it's worth kind of demonstrating that either way before we go, you know, to an potentially unnecessary level of strictness.
So I have a question out of ignorance here. If we were to say change the way, basically remove hoisting in workspace hoisting, right? Without a configuration option, just make that just a flat out change. Would that break anybody right now? Would that really be a breaking change? Is workspaces considered in preview right now, or is this like a production thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that on a Semver level, it would absolutely be a breaking change. On a practical level, it's probably not going to break anyone because theoretically no one's relying on it yet, but it might. And also theoretically, if it did break them, it would break them in a way that tells them quickly how to fix it by putting the dependency in the right place. So maybe it's fine, but like my guess is, that NPM will choose not to be cavalier about the possible risk there.
No, we would do that in a major bump for sure. But you're right, it would be a small one. I would not consider it a big change for a Semver major bump. I'd consider that a much smaller thing. And because like you said, it's going to break your tests, and then you're going to see, oh, it couldn't require a module foo. I guess I have to npm install foo in that workspace. Like it's easy to solve. So the problems I think with I have heard very mixed results on like PNPM broke my entire world versus PNPM saved us from these catastrophic issues, and everything in between, right? And I think shadow depths, what makes shadow dependencies a little bit more of an issue, at least in some cases, is that they're difficult to detect until the problems that they cause are difficult to detect at the point of solving them, right? If we stop hoisting something and now all your tests break in one of your workspaces, like you notice that when you're there at the point where you can fix it. But if there's a shadow dependency which is being hoisted, or like it's a dependency of the root project or something else, and you don't declare it, then far away down the line, when you're deploying your service or when somebody is installing your dependency, then it stops working. We've found that in a couple of cases actually in the NPM Collide project, where we had I don't remember what it was now, but we had a module that was depending on a subdependency of tap, and it was using tap for its tests, so everything always worked. And there was kind of this shadow dependency there. And then when we removed that dependency, that shadow dependency from the CLI, it stopped working, right? And that was kind of like, now you're nowhere near the problem when you actually encounter it. So I think it's worth exploring a way to fix it, and certainly like pure mode or PNPM mode will surface that problem much earlier, and that's kind of a benefit. And like I said, we just really need to delineate like these cases where PNPM currently causes problems, and so mimicking PNPM will probably cause the same problems, and see if we can avoid them somehow. I think that there may be more options than we're kind of going to think of in the next 20 minutes.
Yep. So a good action item, it sounds like, is to try to discover those or get that feedback from people that have PNPM as their primary package manager today in their projects. Vincent, I see your hands up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have. So there's obviously the unknown of, how much of a breaking change it will be in the current state of the RFC, and that we need to go collect that data. But there is also something that I don't know, is that the thing that are breaking, what are they depending on this behavior as a feature, or is it just a mistake that can easily be fixed in their dependency by adding a pure dependency or dependency in the packages? And because these are two different things. If they use the current existing as a feature to do whatever magic, then it's a different class of problem.
Yeah, and I have seen also packages just saying shutting themselves up and just adding it as a peer dependency, even though it shouldn't be one, because that's a way to clue in to PNPM and PNP that this package should have access to that dependency. So like, there's probably a solution to that along the lines of like, provide a mechanism for explicitly saying, I want access to this thing I don't declare that isn't a peer dependency, because that comes with additional semantics. So like, there's like Isaac's saying, there's surely multiple paths through this. And it's probably, it'll probably be helpful to list those cases out.
Rebecca, I see your comment. Did you want to say that out loud explicitly? You're curious how global style impacts these problems?
Just that. Global style is a fairly obscure command line option that makes it so that your direct dependencies are have all of their dependencies installed inside of their folder, not hoisted to the very top. So it just pushes the hoisting out one level, which is how your global, the global directory is installed when you install globals. So like that makes it impossible to accidentally require a shadow dependency in your project, although your dependencies could still do that.
Yeah, other than peers of your peer dependencies of your dependencies as of NPM 7, because those are still installed at the top level if you're in.
Yeah, I would expect that.
But yeah, it does. So the downside of global style, as far as duplication, like makes duplication much worse, right? Essentially, everything that is not a direct dependency is duplicated. It does help prevent, and I have heard of people using it or suggested people use it as a way to kind of detect shadow dependencies within your project, and it's pretty effective there. But it's also, it is obscure. It doesn't get a ton of use.
Yeah, this was less from a this is the correct path forward, and more from a I think this is another way of slicing the problem to like try to understand what the what a good solution would look like.
Mm-hmm.
Did any folks have any other comments or questions on this RFC? We're going to probably keep it open. We're hoping to get some more feedback from the community on this, obviously, before any work before we'd like break ground on any work. So I've taken down 2 action items in terms of trying to bubble up some more information about one, how big of a breaking change would this be if it landed in the current release line or in just within a major release line. So if it was like shipped under a minor, is that acceptable? So like if it's behind a flag, is that acceptable? And then also bubbling up maybe what projects today are breaking that are used at PNPM. That'd be good to just discover, add to this RFC some more information about, feedback that people have and maybe use cases where PNPM breaks down, or that this strategy breaks down. I think just being able to show that shows that we're like going into this like eyes wide open, so that we're managing like the trade-offs of and the benefits here. So I think there's a lot of benefits to Isaac's point. I've heard resounding resounding thanks, but a lot of people have said that PNPM has sped up and cleaned up their projects significantly, and have praised it for obviously being disk efficient. So that's at least indicator that we should be exploring this and trying to do something or provide something similar, right?
Another thing that occurs to me, we haven't really explored this, but we could, if the goal was merely disk efficiency, right? Like don't take up as many blocks on your hard disk. We could potentially do some interesting tricks where we unpack a package tarball into the cache, and then instead of actually creating new files within the node modules folder, we hard link every file from that package into their respective locations in node modules. So, you would just have an extra entry in the file or in the links table without actually having more blocks on your disk being written. And it's significantly faster to create a hard link than it is to write a new file. We just kind of haven't explored it because it hasn't been a priority, and it's just a bunch of typing to make that work. But that might be something that, as we get more large projects using workspaces and using large monorepos, that may be something where we can actually sort of alleviate in a lighter way than pure mode, and with less overhead than pure mode, and also in some ways less benefits. But we could still, maybe in the shorter term, alleviate some of the disk space issues in particular.
Yeah. Vincent, do you want to comment?
Yeah. So the disk space issue, I see it more of an issue because of the time it takes to set up than of the disk it consumes. Like, I think, or I have the impression that the non-module folder is size is not an issue compared to the size of our hard drive these days, but maybe I'm wrong. Following some memes on the internet. What I think is more limiting resource and something every developer feels is the install time. And there's a cost of copying over. So this idea to in the cache to have the cache, have the files in cache and just hard linking. So that's what PNPM does.
No, PNPM symlinks to a folder. I'm talking about
but the files themselves are hard linked inside that folder. So they use.
Okay.
Yeah. So they
I was
do
not
that.
aware of that.
And there was also Yarn version 1. They had this flag called hard link or something like that, where if two files will have to be copied to some location on the non-module folder, because the Yarn cache is uncompressed archive, they will actually copy the first file to the non-module folder, and the second one will be a hard link to the first one in the non-module folder. And that needs to be confirmed, but in my experiments, that didn't, the perf of that was similar as just copying the file. But that needs to be validated. I don't have a strong confidence in that statement. So these are good ideas. The hard link are good ideas that have been implemented. So that's definitely something we can look into.
Yeah, so I just shared the reference there. It's link duplicates from Yarn is the flag I believe you're speaking to.
Yeah, and from PNPM is just the default. So because a package can be like when you have different peer dependencies resolved, you can have one version of one package being multiple in multiple folders, multiple different symlinks, but the content of that folder will be the same. The only difference will be it's their own non-module folders. So the content of that is actually hard link on PNPM.
So you still have, you still have to create all of the same directory structure, but each of the individual files you can hard link.
Right. That's what PNPM does. And maybe that has changed because now they have implemented their content content based storage. So I'm not sure, but at least at some point, that's what PNPM was doing.
Did any other folks have any comments? I know that we've made a number of comments and references to PNPM, obviously, in this call. I did reach out notably to Zoltan and ask for him to comment on the RFC, and did that, and hoping that we can potentially collaborate there, or bubble up the problems that they've found in terms of going with this kind of strategy, so that we work around those. So I think there's opportunity here, obviously, to collaborate closely with those folks. So I'm hoping they engage a bit more on the RFC. Notably, this time isn't very good for Zoltan to come to. So hopefully, if we have to, and if we decide to do a deep dive, we can change the time so it's a little bit easier for folks we want to jump on too. I see, Fritz, you're commenting a bit. Is there anything else you want to share?
Oh, just kind of side conversation about storing unpacked packages in the cache. What the implications are for that. Like Isaac pointed out that that people that are really aggressive with clearing their cache could run into problems. Isaac said that worse than that, somebody adding going into their node modules and adding a console log would then affect multiple projects potentially. And yeah, so just conversation around that.
Yeah,
clearing the cache or throwing away the central store won't do anything if they're hard links, because you'll just have one fewer link to that same block of data on disk. But yeah, it won't be a hard link to there anymore, right? If you once you clear the cache, now everything you install thereafter will not be linked, and you can get into a weird state where it's like it's shared between some projects but not others.
Vincent, I see your hands up.
Yeah, so PNPM has integrity check. So when I don't know if it's activated by default because it's obviously CPU intensive, but with this option, when you install, it will check the integrity of your non-module folder, and if someone change something, it will just put it back to the way it should be. So, but the issue with that is the CPU cost during yarn install during the install process. So yeah.
Also,
sorry, Jordan, you're breaking up. You sound like a robot.
NPM install in
It just keeps
one
going.
project, it would wipe my debugging work that I'd done in another project.
Sorry. So maybe I'll just read the comment.
If they are hard links, then edits you make in one location it wouldn't wipe out. It would take away the debugging work in project B. Like that. This is kind of we're getting off subject and running out of time. But essentially, you add a console log in a/node module/foo. That console log shows up in a/node module/b. If you cleared your cache and then reinstalled B, A would still have the logging, but B no longer would. If you just reinstalled in B and we edited the console, we edited this hard link to a central store, and you didn't clear away the central store, and it said, oh, I already have this file, I can just reuse it. You would just put that console log right back into B, because it would just be another hard link to the same central location. So it's got a lot of weird little things to consider, and it may be something to kind of explore and do a future RFC on. or maybe a spike and just see how bad it is, and then RFC it so we can get like a proper kind of spec and feedback about it.
Yeah, that's another thing. Actually getting down to work and actually seeing how this can be implemented might unearth some answers to some of these questions as well.
For sure.
So we only have a couple of minutes left, and I don't think we're going to get time. And Tierney's not here to provide any updates on the auto assertions RFC number 422, which was the last item here. I was hoping just to have a bit of an update there. It's been open for a couple of weeks, and I'm hoping folks are continuing to give feedback. There's definitely something we want to do in this space soon. So yeah, please continue to give feedback in that RFC and this one as well. But with that, we're essentially at time. So I want to thank everybody for jumping on again today. Thank you, Vincent, for opening up this RFC, and hopefully we'll get to a place where we can actually do something and build something that essentially is in this shape or similar. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you all next week, same time, same place. And thank you for jumping on today. Cheers.
Bye.